Hotel out in the Germantown side, because I'm like, well, if this is going north, I'm going to turn south, and so I got off out there at the 240 40 split. But you know, it's just a reminder that obviously one of the reasons we're here is the main reason we're here is to talk about outages, and you never know when storms are going to hit. They're non-discriminatory. They're going to hit at any time. They seem to always be a storm on Easter weekend. We had storms, snowstorms in East Tennessee and Christmas Eve of 2020 that knocked people out of power up in the Smoky Mountains for over a week. These kind of things are just what we get to deal with in the electric industry. So anyway, just wanted to kind of kick off with that. As a reminder, for those of you who were not here last time, my name is Brian Soulsby, and I'm the Executive Director of the statewide Electric Utility Association.
Wes Hopper, representing the City of Germantown Natural Resources and the City of Memphis Tree Board, as well as the Germantown Tree Board.
Good morning, everyone. Randall Douglas, City of Germantown General Services Director.
Linda Williams, Rosdale Ansdale Area Association, and the Neighborhood Advisory Council.
David Smith, Neighborhood Association.
Make news when the sun's shining and the lights are on. But we're going to get later today. We're going to get into kind of some brainstorming. I know we did a little bit of comment period at the end of the last time, and the important thing is, because this is being broadcast live, is we just need to take our time and kind of pause and make sure that the mic gets to you. There's going to be I've got a mic and we've got another mic out here in the audience, because we want to hear what you have to say, and we want to know who you are, as well as the people online do. So when you get the mic, just state your name again, and kind of what your question is or what your comments may be, when we get to that. So y'all probably learned more than you ever wanted to know about electricity last time. As you recall, Alonzo Weaver with MLGW gave a very informative presentation. And I'm sure that it was informative for all of you. Some of you probably have never heard some of that. Some of you knew the basics, but still, it was very informative and educational. And so I think it's a very good place to start to lay that groundwork. When you think about power, it's not wireless, and it has evolved. It's evolved, and just as MLGW has evolved, over the last into consideration as they determine the best steps that make sense for you, the people and customers of MLGW. So with that, JT, do you have any few comments?
Well, thanks, Brian. I want to add my welcome to you and really my appreciation to those of you for serving on this team. The information is, your input is vital, and in just a few minutes we're going to speak to some of the questions that we received from the public since our last meeting, and we're going to go through those questions and respond to those. But again, thank you all for your engagement and for being here. An error on the agenda, I left off Doug McGowan. Doug's co-chairing this team. I was under the impression he wasn't going to be here, but then he popped in. Of course, Doug's all over the place. So Doug McGowan, certainly appreciate him here with us today. You heard about Alonzo Weaver. As a reminder, he's our Chief Operating Officer, has all of the MLGW operations, gas, water, and electric. And then Dana Jeans, who is our Senior Vice President, Chief Administrative Officer, and Chief Financial Officer, Secretary Treasurer. If we can add another title, we will. Is also here. And some of those questions will be addressed by the two of them. And in the audience, we also have Rod Cleek, who manages our budget and rates. We have Mark. We were impacted, but we had several customers who weren't, and we had crews ready to go and out and about, doing a great job safely getting customers restored. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Doug, if you want to share anything before we get started.
Good morning. Just very briefly on behalf of Mayor Jim Strickland.
To MLGW leadership to help us answer these. With all of the poverty that the pandemic has caused, and at the same time people have lost power multiple times, and MLGW raising the prices on the power, it would be a great idea to make everyone pay half of their electric bills every month for the same amount of time the pandemic messed up people's jobs during 2020 and 2021, and MLGW matched the other half of those bills. Okay, Dana, are you going to take this one as the financial officer, chief financial officer?
Yeah, I guess I'll take this one. MLGW's sources of revenue are basically from customers, so it would be really fiscally impossible for this to happen. Essentially, MLGW could not match the other half of the bills because the revenue comes from customers. So what we've done over the years is try to be fiscally responsible. We do
And to sort of juxtapose that to the public power area where we are today, one of the things I'll tell you about rate setting in that environment that's different from rate setting in this environment is, and typically the public service commissions that regulate those investor-owned utilities do not generally take into account.
Now, tree trimming for purposes of utility reliability is a little different than tree trimming for aesthetics, and we understand that. There's some challenges that it doesn't necessarily look good when we go through and do what we need to do. But we try to trim within the health of the tree as well as maintaining the reliability of our lines.
Okay, thank you. The third one, not a question, just unacceptable. I think the answer to that is that's why MLGW's executive team is here with you today.
Or communications via text, due primarily to the fact that the infrastructure associated with that system was damaged during the storm. And so we are in the process now of restoring that and bringing that back on. In fact, I got a text last night about the storm coming in. So I think we are now in the process of bringing customers back and making improvements to that. But I do appreciate the feedback. We will certainly, we do this a lot anyway, work with other utilities around best practices. And so certainly the information that this person shared regarding DTE, we have actually folks that we communicate with up there as well. So we can certainly look into that.
And, you know, I can say personally, as someone who's a customer of another utility, when I'm here in town and staying locally at a hotel, got on the local news, you know, MLGW, seems like there's always communication on the local news, commercial spots talking about, you know, your app and outage and those kind of things. So, and I know that as I was watching yesterday, hold up on the east side of the county, and the local news was reporting, you know, they were saying, is there an appeal if MLGW declines to help trim trees? They say no danger, yet limbs are directly above the lines.
In situations like that, we need to take a look at from a case-by-case basis on those. On lines that are primary lines, we cut 15 feet on each side of that line on a three-phase line, and I believe 10 feet on each side from a single-phase line that's on the 12 and 23,000 kV lines. Now, as far as the services, we may not trim above a service to the sky, but on the lines that go, that feed several homes or feed an entire neighborhood or a block, we will trim to the sky. So we have to look at the various cases in regard to that to make that determination. So if there's a situation that's questioned, you can call us so we can take a look at it.
And also during the storm, our response time actually was a lot higher. Those emergency calls have a priority, and so we actually had a day where I think we were at about 19 seconds for handling some of those emergencies for wires downs and those things. So that small telecommuting does not have a negative impact. It actually helps us.
Okay, the next question. Have you considered creating a relay with 311 app to report broken poles, street lights, and other outages? Many people call them anyway. A simple email relay of these calls to your staff can alleviate the many hours hold time that all MLGW customers must endure.
So we can definitely look into something like that. Again, we do also have the outage hotline that on the peak of the storm handled 169,000 calls in one day without you having to speak with someone that gives you the same information that a live person has from the exact same system. So we can definitely look at some additional means for that, but for right now, that main thing is using that outage hotline to report your outages or broken poles.
Martrice, I'm sorry, do you want to speak to the fact that we've been also in communication with University of Memphis on some other potential options for expanding the ability to?
Yeah, so we've been looking with University of Memphis, doing some research on doing some overflow call center information so that as we get heavier volumes, to have someone else assist with doing some of that peak load that's not some of our typical calls. So we've actually been looking into some options like that also.
Okay, I think number 10 here is just kind of a statement that during the storm,
Cable that takes a little more time, but some things like simple fixes can be done pretty quickly. So when customers have situations like this, we want to know about them and we want to address them.
Okay, a couple of additional questions came in after that initial round. I think the initial round was prepped for our meeting 2 weeks ago. And then these two new ones here. Does each member of the OIAT receive a report of the number of outages that take place throughout Memphis, Germantown, Lakeland, etc., as they happen daily, weekly, or monthly?
I don't know, Alonzo, if you want to address this at all either, but that's if that's that's a question. I think the answer is you all do not get those today. But I think that the implication to the question is probably a good one now. As you all know, the outage map is available publicly to everyone, so you can always real time. Well, it's updated I think every 15 minutes, so you have really live updates on the outage map. But I think maybe this is suggesting that the team maybe receive a report on how many outages there were every day. We do have, let me remind everybody, we do actually have outages virtually every day for, as you heard Alonzo say in the first meeting, for all sorts of reasons. We had an issue this past Sunday where we lost a little over 9,000 customers for a while due to an animal situation at a substation. So that was one of the causes, if you remember from the meeting last month that Alonzo mentioned, well, in real life that happened, created a situation where for about 2 hours we had an outage there. So but that was also reflected on the outage map. If you looked at it, you could have seen that. But certainly that's something we could do in terms of, just so you can get an idea. But the one thing to keep in mind is it does take a minute, and I don't want to take from what Alonzo would say, it does take a minute for folks to assess the reason. Sometimes it's pretty obvious, other times it's not. But to be able to maybe look at the duration of these sessions and maybe go back and do a review of those and send you all information on those outages, to give you a flavor of how and why those outages occurred and the duration and the number of customers impacted. So we'll work on getting that for each of you.
And the last question is, why aren't any people that actually work the storms involved in these meetings so we can get a real-time look at what is happening on the ground during the restoration process?
That's another good question. I don't know who submitted it, but I think it's a good question. One of the things, the challenges we have to balance, of course, is making our personnel available to be responsive. There's work going on every day, all day, that a lot of these folks are having to be directly involved in. And so we do, in fact, want to make sure that we have a broad base of input. That is the reason that these meetings are public and that we stream this continually. But I think the question sort of speaks to maybe getting the input directly from employees who might be in the field working. And one of the things that I will assure you that we will do is work with our folks to make sure we integrate their feedback into solutions or possible solutions, prior to the completion of this. And I think that's a great point as well.
All right. Well, thank you for those questions. Like I said, we will, I think, roll into the next part is a continuation of Alonzo's presentation. So I will hand it over to him for the time being, and then we will take a break if he gets long-winded, and then he'll wrap up, and like I said, we'll have some brainstorming session.
Yeah, thank you, and good morning. Good morning. It's good to see you all here today. In spite of my presentation last week, we came back, or last month. I'm glad to see you. It makes me feel good. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Storm Landon, the storm that came through in February that caused all the problems and is the reason why we're here. It was an ice storm, much like many of the other ice storms that we've had, and we've been through a few. And we'll have to talk about that. I'm going to try to move quickly. because I know that, one, you're gonna get tired of sitting down. Two, you're gonna get tired of hearing me. For three, you may have to go to the restroom. So, we're gonna move on. So, Winter Storm Landon was stretched from Texas to Maine, and it spanned over 2,000 miles. It was a pretty massive storm. In Memphis, it produced about 1/2 inch of ice accumulation. And through the period that the storm came through, and ice storms are kind of funny, even though the ice storm is here and it leaves, you still have tree limbs falling throughout that time period. So we measured it from the 3rd of February to the 14th, and we had peak outages of 186,000. So at any one time, MLGW had about 186,000 people out at the peak. But total customers affected, which is over that time period, was 233,640. So we can measure all of that. Our total restoration hours was 272 hours. This is some of the national headlines. You probably saw them, you probably read them, you probably said, yeah, I'm living it. And you can see what Landon was doing throughout the country, and it did it in Memphis, Tennessee. So kind of put this storm in context. It is probably our 4th largest storm, and it's probably our 2nd largest ice storm of recent history. Because we did have some, I heard about a storm in 55, but I was nowhere near around. But there was a storm that caused us significant trouble in 1985. But it's the 4th largest event in terms of peak customers interrupted in history, only behind what we call Hurricane Ellis. That the ratio that came through in 2003 caused significant damage to our storms and to our power systems. It caused damages to houses, buildings. It was an incredible wind event.
Richard.
Is he doing that? Okay.
So, what happens when we go into storm mode? A lot of things happen. We do have an emergency response plan. It's been around for years, decades. We put crews and personnel on standby. That includes the actual crews that are doing the work and doing the restoration, as well as those who will be managing the crews and managing the restoration. That includes the logistics team, the operations team, the planning team. You'll see those in the flow chart or organizational chart here in a minute. We assess and replenish food fuel supplies. We've been impacted by supply chain issues just like anybody else. So we try to make sure that we have those supplies in place. We formulate storm kits and get materials together for the contract crews. When the contract crew arrives, we bring them in, we say, all right, here's your kit of stuff to go out and repair. So we prepare a kit for each one of those crews. And then we have pre-event crisis team communications. We have conference calls, Zoom meetings to try to get everybody together and make sure we're all communicating who's here, who's not, who's available, who's not, whether or not we've got materials in place. So this is the organizational structure. So there's a lot of people involved in doing outage restoration that are behind the scenes. And this is the behind the scenes group. When we were meeting in person, it's about a room that probably had about 30 to 40 people in each team meeting. It included the logistics people who were very important to getting this all taken care of, as well as the planning section and the operations section. And of course, Dana and his team are counting the costs. So next few pictures just kind of displays the type of damage that we had with this storm. Ice storms cause a lot of damage, widespread damage. And although you may work in one area, there are usually several areas of damage that will affect the customer. And you can see this is pretty incredible. This particular area, this was I believe, in Binghamton, Pendleton, and Kendall, on the right. What's on the left? Okay. But I think those were both in that area, but in the Bethel Grove area, excuse me, Bethel Grove area of Memphis and South Memphis. If you can see, there's just a lot of damage that occurs. This particular site was a 13-pole line damage. 13 poles were damaged on this pole line. And it was all done by, I think, one tree. And we went out there, we walked along the line, and it's kind of like one tree out there that caused all of this. 13 poles are a lot of poles. It takes a lot of time to do that. So you see the damage, the type of damage that we had, and a lot of questions asked, well, how do you go back and restore all this power? How do you make the decisions? What do you do to determine what gets priority? We'll start first with making sure our facilities are up. And this includes water facilities, wastewater plants, hospitals, places that are important to life and safety. Then we'll move to making sure we're working on circuits first. As I mentioned to you last time, circuits carry the most number of people for the amount of effort that we put forth in restoring the outage. It's also important for the circuit to be up so we can restore the other outages that occur behind the circuit. So the biggest return is the circuit. You can see that's number 4 listed here. And that brings most of the power into a neighborhood. So they will get a large swath of customers on. Then we'll work on the taps. The taps will go into various blocks or subgroups of that neighborhood. We'll deal with the services off of the transformer. There's a transformer right there. And it gets 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 customers on. This may get about 30 or 40 customers on, but this may get hundreds of thousands of customers on. So that's why we prioritize the circuits first. As time went on, we started saturating areas. We looked at areas that had the most number of customers out, and once they got the circuits up, we worked everything that was, tried to work everything that was in that area. Now, what that means, somebody may look at all this 2 or 3 different times, because you may have a need for tree trimming to take place. That has to be checked, and it has to be decided. There may be a trouble man that will do some of the initial survey of the information and give that back to our dispatching group so we determine what type of resources to get out to do the repair. So you may see people come out 2 or 3 times before they can get you on. So when we restore, what do we think would be the first thing and the most important thing that we would consider? True, but as we send crews out, what are we trying to make sure that we are cognizant of? Safety, exactly. So safety is important because when you've got so many personnel that are out working, you get so many lines down, you get all that sort of thing, it's a very unsafe environment. People can get hurt, people can get killed. We want to make sure that they're working safely. We also have to realize some crews we can't get until after the storm passes. So a lot of the contracted crews, in order to know where they're coming from, we have to see what areas get impacted and what areas don't get impacted. So as I said before, these crews are usually working someplace else and have to be released. So we have to make sure that they're available for us to use. Now, we talked about this before. Our outage alert system, the text alert system, is tied to our metering system, and the metering system has a communication system that sits on street lights. All right, so the street lights were out, which was the communication infrastructure behind that system, and made it difficult to get information back for the text alerts. So some of the text alerts information we'll get back is not necessarily accurate, it's not necessarily timely, so we had some challenges with that. A lot of people say, hey, I don't see a crew working on my outage. It's pop quiz. It's been a month. Average circuit length. Well, anyone. It could be anywhere from 2, 3, 4, 5 miles. It could be crews working far away from you, from your home or from your neighborhood, that are trying to restore your outage. So you may not see them working right next to your home or actually in your neighborhood. As I said before, you may see a lot of people come out and look at things and not necessarily be able to fix it all or fix things. So that's just the way it works in the industry. It was difficult for us to get to all the down power lines. We recognize that as an issue. But we always want to remind customers, if you see a line that's down, stay away from it. It's okay to call us and say, hey, let's take care of this. I really need you to take it. And we would try to do it. But we had, I think, was it 4,000 of these? We had 4,000 down line calls. And that's kind of the nature of how ice storms produce damage. It happens everywhere. There's a lot of it. So, these are customers affected by the 2022 ice storm by city, council, and municipality. As you can see, the largest percentage of customers in the district that were considered and the largest number were in District 5. I think we're in District 5 right now, maybe. And there were a lot of customers that were affected by it. But the damage was widespread. This is our restoration curve. You can see the peak number there at the top, 186, as I communicated it to you earlier. And other numbers were numbers that were at the end of the day, basically midnight. Resources. People want to know how many folks we have working. So MLGW has on staff 40 troubleshooters. And they work to do the initial assessment, and they try to restore as many people as they can when they go out and take a look at that assessment. So they work real hard alone a lot of times, sometimes in groups, we pair them up a lot of times, to walk a circuit, to drive a circuit, to see where the damage is, and try to isolate it and get as many customers on as possible. We have 26 MLGW overhead crews that were working, along with the shift crews, of course. The network crews, we convert those network crews and put them to work on outage type of work. The network crews are the ones that handle the downtown network, and that's about 136 people. We had 78 contracted tree trimming crews. This is about 273 folks. That number grows on the time. We were able to get tree trimming resources for storm-related restoration pretty easily. We had 90 contractor crews that came from various states, and that's about 450 people that we used. We mobilized our electric substation meter operations crews, 125 people, primarily assigned to services. They work on, they would try their best to get a service back up for a customer. That service line is the line that runs from your home, your wellhead to the pole, and they will try to do their work. They don't normally do this kind of work, but they will do that. And They're trying to do that. But if there's something that they can't do, is unsafe, they may turn it over to a distribution crew, and sometimes that does happen. But they do a lot of checks. They did a couple thousand of them, maybe more, of just going out and checking and trying to get a service back up and making sure the customer's back on it if at all possible. We bring in retirees and we have engineers. Retirees work with the contract crews as far as inspection and helping them navigate through the city, as well as engineers who we mobilize to do some of the assessment as well. So it's about 1,100 people that we mobilize for this effort to get restore power with this particular storm. Communication efforts and community outreach. We work real hard to try to communicate out to the customers, let them know, one, storm's coming, two, what they should do when the storm comes, three, how we're going to try to assist you if the storm comes. So, and we get a lot of information. Customers call us. They call us and they put in, they call them to the call center, they call them into the outage hotline, but they also text us, Twitter, Facebook, all of that. So we have people that monitor all of that to try to get information on what's going on out there in the field. So those are our metrics around social media metrics as well as our web traffic. A lot of people use and come and look at our outage map to see how we're progressing. If you tap on a particular area of the outage map, you can see the various outages in that particular area and what stages of restoration they're in. So a lot of people access and communicate with us at a lot of different means. Media relations. Now, I didn't know until my cousin texted me in Montgomery and my niece texted me in San Francisco that we had made national news. She said, but we have made national news, and the Wall Street Journal, Weather Channel, a lot of different organizations and news organizations tapped into our feeds on our various press conferences. And we had, for a while, we had daily press conferences that were Facebook Live and YouTube, I believe, right there?
Yeah, exactly.
So we put those out on a daily basis, and people were tapping into them, recording their feeds and putting it into their broadcast. So it was quite an event. A lot of people were paying attention. What we launched during this process, we did some new things. We had some dashboards that were created. And some of this information that we've had working with using the background anyway, but we just hadn't made it public facing. But the dashboard itself is something that we kind of grew out of our process of restoring the water system, actually. So we said, let's do a different version of that dashboard for purposes of dealing with electric restoration. Community outreach. We had food pantries that we went out and had food distribution. Need more coffee. Food distribution, as well as, and our employees staff that. They go out and they volunteer to do these sort of things. So, so we had various food pantries set up, as well as work with the Department of Human Services and identifying customers that may need to have their supplies and groceries replenished because of the storm. Phone calls answered. Now they're asking about phone calls because we know there's somebody here that can answer questions about phone calls, and that's our Tracy. But, so, as you can see right at the very beginning, we had a lot of customer care phone calls answered, and then it tailed off toward the end. We set it up to take the emergency calls around outages mainly, and then anything that might be a dangerous situation, a gas leaks, whatever. So we try to get all our calls in and try to answer them. I still say the best way, other than Well, one of the best ways of getting your outage reported is to call into the outage hotline because of the number of customers it can handle at the time. And that's how that number pops out. When you look at the outage hotline on the first, I think it was a Thursday or Friday of that storm, it handled 169,000 calls. That's the customer care center. That's the outage hotline. It can handle a lot of calls and get a lot of information in. And that information is helpful for us. Because as I mentioned before, we have the customer restoration systems computerized, and we take that information integrated and are able to infer what may be causing the outage. So the more data we have, the better it works. We don't mind you calling back and check it. We don't mind you calling back and say, hey, I'm still out. We need all of that information so we can make sure we respond to your issues. Cost projections. I believe this needs to be an updated number. What is the number now, Dana?
It's going to be a little bit north of 15 million now.
So a little bit more than what we originally projected. We look at our burn rate as we go through the storm and we come to projection, but once we get all the bills in, that's when we get the real number. Declaration was made on the 11th of March. The way FEMA works with us is they do a 75% reimbursement. 75% reimbursement is will be based on a $15 million number. And just for context, once again, the 94 ice storm was 14 days. In 2003, Hurricane Ellis was 16 days, and there were about 14.5 million and 31 million in total event costs expected. Some early lessons learned. And we're going to learn more from you later on in this morning's session. We need to provide more timely information to our customer care team so that we can be prepared to answer customer questions about restoration efforts. We need to disable our text alert system when we have widespread damage and there's not good communication flow from the meter back to our care system, which is the system of truth that determines the outage. We need to evaluate our damage assessment strategy. As I said, one of the things that we're concerned about is downlines, but also just getting a good picture of what's out there so we can make better global estimates about when we will get some work done and when we will have customers back on. Pre-arrangements and staging of outside crews, crew transportation, lodging locations. This is kind of an internal issue, but we've got a lot of hotel rooms, and customers apparently took those rooms, which made it harder for crews to take those rooms. So we got to figure out a different way to manage it. So we had some challenges there of getting crews lodged and getting them lodged in an area that's close to us. We had one set of crews that had to go as far as Jackson, Tennessee. So those kinds of issues are things we have to work on. Traffic signals. And people want to move on and have to be mobile in society in order to get to either supplies, or get to work, or whatever they have to do in their lives. And so we got to figure out prioritization of traffic signals that hit intersections and try to get those up as quickly as possible. Kind of slide them into the priority list. Trying to give customers ahead of the storm, I'll just need feedback on this, ahead of the storm, how long it might take. That is a really challenging thing. Okay, you put it like this. Yesterday, how long do you think you're going to be out today? Depending on the weather reports, or depending on who was presenting, we were going to be out for days. But most of us are kind of gone, about a couple hundred. So it's really hard to come up with that answer, but I want to hear more about it. We're going to look at our crisis team structure and associated process, lead tweaks to ensure proper prioritization of actions needed during restoration. We want to make sure we got the right people managing the various teams and make sure we got the right members on the teams. Going to continue to leverage our partnerships with the American Public Power Association and other utility industry affiliations to get some best practices. We've been looking over some reports here and there that may give us some ideas. Accountability. We will review with our board and our council, our storm restoration plan. It's updated annually. We've got to make sure, one, we've got the right phone numbers for everybody trying to reach, but also make sure we've got the right people in the right different parts of the organization. Community engagement opportunities. This is one, but we'll also be meeting with various community areas, council districts, municipalities, just to talk about how we do things, try to get some feedback on how we can do it better. And once we activate our crisis team in advance of the storm, we have a pre-activation process that takes place. We'll communicate that out, let people know that we are doing something, that we're prepared for a storm, and that we're getting things staged in place. So, don't we need to keep talking? We need a break. They look like they need a break. So, how long do we want to do?
Hi, I just have a couple of questions that are points of clarification I was hoping we could make before we go on.
Excuse me, can you just say your name before the question?
I'm Heather Brandt, I'm a community member. So one of my first questions is, given some of the challenges you just presented in early lessons learned related to data capacity, with what degree of certainty are you that the total number estimated outages is accurate? You know, thinking about the challenges with the text message system, the challenges with the smart meters. So are those data sources based on just customer reported outages or a range of different data sources to get to those estimates?
There are a range of different data sources, and they go back, it all goes back to our CARE system, which I talked about earlier. So when the customer calls in, information is put into the CARE system. When a circuit goes out on the SCADA system, it talks to the CARE system. When an individual customer is out, that handoff goes from the meter and to the meter data management system, and that goes to the CARE system. So all three of those go into the CARE system. As you can see earlier, we had, on the first day, we had 169,000 customers that were called in. It's probably fair enough to say that some of those may have been duplicates, but if they were all individual calls, they were all out. And so we go through and kind of scrub the data, we look for duplicates, and make sure that we are not double counting. And so there's a process that they use in trying to extract that number.
Thank you for that clarification. And then the second thing I wanted to mention, one of the reasons why I'm so excited to have a seat at this table and be able to participate is that I'm really wanting to focus on solutions. And so I appreciate the framing of your early lessons learned in that solution-oriented way. So thank you for that as well.
We're looking forward to more input. About 10 minutes. Everybody's come back at 10:15.
Hey.